Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today. The title of today's webinar is Unifying Cross-App Segregations of Duties. My name is Stephanie Anderson. I'm the Global Webinar Manager here at Pathlock. Ryan, will you go to the next slide? Before we start, I'd like to just go over a few housekeeping items. If you cannot hear this audio, click on Preferences and then Audio. From there, you can check to see if you are using the appropriate audio device. You can also click on the play sound to check if you can hear the sound coming from your speakers. This presentation will take approximately 30 minutes to an hour. And there will be a Q&A session following the presentation, so please type any questions into the Q&A chat box for our speakers to answer at the end of the event. To prevent background noise, everyone is on mute. Ryan, can you go to the next slide? Our presenters today are Ryan Quinones, Senior Manager of Product Marketing at Pathlock, and Anand Koti, Director of Solution Engineering at Pathlock. And with that, I'll turn the time over to them.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you, everybody, for joining us in this bright and early morning. You know, it's 7 a.m. for some folks on the West Coast. My name is Ryan Quinones, I'm Product Marketing Manager here at Pathlock, responsible for our access governance solutions, and I am happy to be here today to speak to you guys really around cross-app segregation of duties. Before we jump in, I want to turn it over to Anand for a quick introduction as well.
Hi everyone, Anand Koti. I'm the Director of Solution Engineering at Pathlock. Been with the company for a little over a year and been in the security industry for the last 15 years. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Anand. All right, so before we jump into all the fun, exciting stuff, I wanted to give a quick high level of Pathlock, of who we are. So Pathlock is the market-leading unified access governance platform. So we're working with some of the world's leading organizations, governance, and auditors, really around across about 500 customers, 600 customers, protecting millions of users across billions of business activities. And excited to say our company has grown a lot in the past 3-4 years. We just recently acquired a big M&A event around some of the leading SAP access governance players, really in our drive to expand cross-application control, automation, and application security. So at a high level, that's Pathlock. And today, jump into our session on really what we'll be diving into, which is segregation of duties across applications. So everybody's familiar with segregation of duties. It's really one of these core controls for mitigating risks of fraud, theft, error, as well as vital to SOX compliance. So while traditional application-specific SOD solutions have sufficed in the past, today really we're seeing a move towards a distributed, more integrated application landscape. That's posing new challenges. So what we want to cover today is really how do we handle these SOD risks that span your complex ERP systems like SAP or Oracle EBS, as well as some of these ancillary business applications. So today's session, we'll dive into what it takes to centralize these SOD control processes. How do we prevent conflicts at the start around compliant provisioning across the entire application landscape? And how can you clearly articulate the financial exposure and access risks that's going on around SOD and actively mitigate them? And finally, with this information, how you can empower your risk owners to make more informed decisions based on actual material impact of these violations, things like did-do transaction activity monitoring. So really making sense of what's going on and taking the best informed approach to resolving that. So with that, it's 7 a.m. on the West Coast. Who doesn't like to start their day with some statistics? Really what I want to touch on is how digital transformation is shifting the access governance paradigm. And what I mean by that is what we just touched on. We kind of went from a very consolidated approach around a lot of your processes were in a single application to now we have multiple applications, and the growth has been exponential. I think right now, over the past 4 years, we've seen a 68% growth in the number of business applications an organization has. This is around 129, and I'm sure it's many more. In a recent survey by SAP Insider, we asked these ERP customers, how many materially relevant applications do they have connected to their ERP landscape? And the vast majority, almost 60%, had at least 6 connected applications. So this means there's 6 applications that you have a business process that is materially relevant traveling across. So you can see how complex this can get. And these challenges are really compounded by the regulatory environment. You know, the concern around change that we've seen here. Maybe it's a new addition to SOX, maybe it's European SOX or GDPR. We're seeing a high level of regulatory change, and this is putting a lot of pressure on folks concerned about that stuff. And it looks like it's going to increase. So this problem's not going away. It's likely only going to get more complicated. So these critical business applications that people have adopted, I mean, they're great for unlocking best of breed solutions. I mean, we've seen, you know, all of these processes here may have been within SAP in the past, but now we've adopted Ariba. Now we also have Oracle. So a process that was once in one application is now touching maybe 3, maybe 4. And this is really creating a challenge around segregation of duties, because it's hard to see what's going on inside the applications, and you have to correlate everything. And this brings it to the next point here. You know, normalizing the various security models woven in these modern business processes is the key challenge of today and tomorrow, especially as we see this trend continuing. Now, if you look at what goes on into really the user entitlements that dictate access and business processes going on in your applications, it varies a lot from application to application. You know, you might be somewhat similar on the user side. Maybe it's gonna be easy to normalize that. Let's use a role in this application versus that application. But once you get kind of more granular details beyond roles, you're saying, okay, transaction codes, authorization objects, field values in SAP. But in Salesforce, it's going to be something completely different. So being able to make sense of this is going to be vital to be able to manage segregation of duties. Now, some organizations, you know, we're looking at how do we approach this? How do we solve this? They may turn to the IGA solutions that they have to really go deep into this stuff. You know, they're already thinking about access risks and user security here. They're taking kind of an identity-centric approach. But they want to see if they can go deeper into these entitlements that are crucial to understanding SOD by leveraging their IGA solutions. And really, this has been an area that's been covered by application-specific solutions like SAP Access Control or Oracle GRC, because these apps are very complex. Now, the issue is that if you're looking to rely on an IGA solution to go deep into these, to understand access risks, you're also looking at the development priorities of these companies. IGA is really focused around the identity. It's focused around managing user access, maybe provisioning across a variety of applications, but not the actual access risk. And if you're hoping for these companies to go deep, the bad news is that, you know, they are in a competitive environment with other IGA solutions. Their development priorities aren't going to be going deep into the application to make sense of SOD across everything here. They're going to be, you know, rolling out the next new feature that gives them a leg up on the other IGA competitor. So besides, you know, looking at trying to go deep with an IGA solution, I mean, folks are looking at basically assigning more resources to handle this challenge. You know, if you've got a process that spans 3 or 4 applications, you know, you might set up, okay, maybe I'm gonna have admin teams, security admin teams for each application. I'm gonna have 3 people on SAP, another 2 on SuccessFactors, another one on PeopleSoft, and these folks are gonna be handling really the provisioning and access requests to these applications. They're gonna be looking at, you know, are there violations that are gonna be in place if I make this change? They're gonna be helping out with the reporting of things here. And you can see how this stacks up the more and more applications you have, because this is a very specific domain knowledge that you have to be able to understand the security models and the implications. Now, beyond, you know, siloed security teams, they may be sending up additional process control owners aligned to lines of business. They might have somebody for finance that maps this process across the applications and tries to understand the risk. You might step up additional internal auditors to really ensure that this is going forward and the risks are mitigated and controlled there. But as you can see, again, it's exponential in how complex this gets, and it can be challenging to really, actually innovate and adopt best of breed solutions when you have all this overhead kind of holding you back. So that brings us to really what Pathlock is doing here. And our main goal on the access governance front is to help customers harmonize their cross-application controls. So the way we do this is we help translate business activities across over 140 applications. This means making sense of what's going on in there, who's doing what, and kind of normalizing it with application to application. So you've got one centralized place to understand what's going on, the risks involved. So with this, you're able to understand the SOD conflicts within a single application itself and across applications. And we do all of this with really 100% visibility and real-time analysis into any sort of changes going on, into any sort of activity that users are performing. And all this stuff really helps automate the controls that are necessary to manage SOD and automate audit activities. It leads to a lot of cost savings, time savings, as well as reducing risk for the organization. So the way we look at this is that we're spanning all applications, all users, all activity, and all risks at all times. The key goal here is really to help automate segregation of duty policies, because we see the trend that manual processes aren't sustainable. Everybody's looking for an automated solution, to be faster, to be cheaper, to help mitigate more risk. But we also have to do this in a sense that works in a cross-application environment here. So that's what we're pulling together, connecting to your various applications from ERP, cloud, legacy, and enterprise systems, building a real-time connection in there, and then supporting that with your can-do analysis around things, your traditional access governance activities here, analyzing access on UARs, handling access management requests, things like that, and then pulling in a did-do analysis, understanding what actually happened beyond what we can do. And then finally, quantifying this risk. You got to understand what's the impact. It's great if you have a lot of data, but you still have to dig through it all and figure out what to focus on. This needs to be prioritized to actually have an impact in terms of improving your operating environment there. So I think what really sets us apart is combining this deep understanding of entitlements across all these applications with user activity. For this 360-degree approach of risk analysis here. So if we go back to what we saw earlier around different security models in here, if you've taken a look at SAP Access Control, for example, it is very good at this, but expanding to other areas takes a little bit of work. And this is really around the can-do. This is understanding what risks exist, especially around segregation of duties. Does a user have, do certain roles have, do business roles have? And this is important to understand, okay, is there a toxic combination? And having across multiple applications is now vital, because if you don't have visibility, if you can't correlate this stuff, then everything might be fine. You might be looking with a false sense of hope that everything's compliant, there's no conflicts in the roles themselves from one application to another. But you really need to have a granular visibility down into finer-grained entitlements to understand, is that really true? Now, that's one side of it. I'll call that 180 degrees on one side. Now, on the did-do is pulling the activity from all of these applications. What transactions are performed, what data is being accessed, what data is being changed, and what log data is being produced by these applications. Correlating this information and identifying what users did do. Identifying, hey, was this a materially relevant violation, or was it a false positive? With the visibility into the transaction, the data itself, we're able to identify, basically identify real, actual violations and filter out any sort of false positives to give you that other 180-degree view to bring together for a complete six-fold model of SOD risk management. One on, ensuring that the setup is correct, and then two, managing the actual activity that's going on to identify any sort of violations, to help expedite exception management and support audit activities. And with that said, I want to jump into really unifying this cross-app segregation of duties, how we're helping out here, and the key pillars in this area. So I like to split this down really into 4 areas, because I think this is most vital to segregation of duties in terms of cyclical management and the life cycle that goes on here. So really starting out with the cross-app analysis here. This is when we're looking at across applications, what's going on here, identifying your rules and how that impacts each application, translating the activities to make sense of risk. Now we move over to compliant provisioning. We want to have that check in place to understand, if we, assign this access right or this authorization to a user, or we assign this role to this user, is this going to create an SOD violation of any sort across an application landscape? And if you don't have a way of analyzing across app segregation duties, you could have a blind spot there, really not knowing that granting access to this one application now allows a user to commit fraud because they also have this conflicting access in another application. Now moving over really to kind of the did-do side of things, what activity is going on, applying continuous monitoring and risk quantification of everything is going to be vital. We've got to move from point in time, snapshots or audits of activity more towards a continuous model that highlights and prioritizes what you need to work on. Because otherwise, maybe you're working from a sample size of 10%, you're leaving a lot of risk unaddressed, or maybe you're wasting time on immaterial events. You see an SOD violation, you go in there and realize that, okay, nothing was materially relevant, financial data wasn't changed, just a conflicting transaction. This weighs down organizations, increased costs. It really is a hindrance to improving your access governance model and SOD management. And then finally, pulling into access reviews and certifications. From a SOX perspective, organizations need to do this, at least once a year. And ideally, from an SOD perspective, as well as just general least privilege and mitigating access risks, we want to review and ensure that the minimum amount of access that is needed is assigned to users here, as well as understanding that, are there any sort of SOD violations, and is it necessary from an exception perspective? And one of the ways you look at did-do analysis with access reviews is actually correlating, what activity, what transactions, what processes did this user do, which ones did they not? So to be able to see that, you can identify maybe they weren't using this entitlement, so we can remove that. It's not necessary anymore, and you can further reduce your access risk. So at a high level, this is, I think what's important around segregation of duties management, especially bringing it all together from a cross-application side of things. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time going in a few details of each one of these quadrants here, and then I'm going to pass it off to Renan to show you guys a demo, because I think really demo is what we're here for. So from really the cross-app analysis side, we're providing a single pane of glass for SOD analysis to help uncover these access risks and review entitlements across the applications. Currently, it can be challenging because access is very much siloed. It's going to be reviewed system by system, and if there is any sort of cross-system analysis, it's typically going to be done manually. And this leads to violations going undetected, or it leads to organizations having a false sense of security in here. So what we're doing is bringing these applications together, bringing the security models together, and correlating the roles with a cross-application SOD rule set to help identify your violations, alert the reviewers, create an audit trail of what's been going on through here. Now, one of the ways we do this is really we pull this information from all of your applications into an identity sync and repository sync. This comes into the Pathlock platform, and this kind of acts as your centralized control, or your centralized database, if you will, of activity in here, and help customers apply really out-of-the-box rule sets for SOD risks that are common scenarios in cross applications, as well as extend custom SOD rule sets here. And this analysis is either ad hoc, or you can set up campaigns for the certain stakeholders, control owners, to do this on a periodic basis and have that information reported on to satisfy audit. Excuse me. So, when we identify an SOD conflict across applications, really you have to mitigate it or remediate it here. You either accept it, acknowledge it here, or you move on to remediating it here. On the remediation side, trigger the workflow to make sure this happens and goes forward. Now, in terms of user provisioning, I would say this is the same side. We're taking this information from all the applications here, and then helping map, okay, between your business roles and your technical roles, what's necessary here, what is most appropriate here. And then furthermore, from the user life cycle management side, helping out with the joiner, mover, leaver process in terms of recommending best fit roles and surfacing any sort of conflicts that might be present there. Really, so before a conflict even arises, you have a check and balance in place to ensure that SOD compliance is being aligned in your provisioning. And the same thing would apply to access request management. So if you've got your users coming in here, let's say they want to request access in Ariba, for example, but they also have access already in your SAP instance, we can do the check in here to let your approvers know, hey, this request for a specific application would create a SOD violation because they have access in this other application. So it's a centralized, really centralized approach that is necessary to identify these cross-app SOD violations. And we're helping enable the process really in every step, from early provisioning, in joiner, mover, leaver, and down to individual access requests here that are going on. Obviously, this is all done with your SOD checks, acknowledging it's in there if there is an exception, and creating an audit trail that really supports your audit team here. Now, in terms of monitoring, what we've seen at best I've seen from organizations is maybe they're using a SIM solution or any sort of data warehouse, and they're pulling in logs from each of the applications they have connected together. That's the best case scenario if they're doing on a somewhat continuous basis. But even then, you're looking at how do I correlate this data? How do I normalize it? How do I make sense of it? More often, what we see is that folks are using these point-in-time snapshots or using an audit to try and identify all the activity that's going on in here. Well, what we're really trying to help customers do is move this to a more continuous model for monitoring security events and helping out with compliance. So really being able to identify SOD violations as they happen, we're mitigating, I would say, the dwell risk, the dwell time of a violation. And just from a cost savings perspective of reducing the impact of fraud, I mean, imagine if you had an alert, the day of a fraudulent transaction happened. You could go in there and kind of reverse or do damage control of whatever, let's say that fraudulent payment went out to a fictitious vendor. You could then stop it, stop the wire transfer as it happens and save thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Versus if you're using a point-in-time snapshot, you might not recognize that for 3 months, 6 months, however long your audit period is. And at that point, money's in the Cayman Islands. So I want to take a look at this in a little bit more detail, because when we talk about can-do analysis and did-do analysis, really what we're looking at here is optimizing how efficiently you can analyze your SOD violations, as well as remediate any sort of violations you see in here. So this kind of example case study, we look at potential risk, can-do, and all the time you'll see organizations with users that have SOD exception. That's kind of a way of life. But you have to be able to make sense of what's material and what's immaterial. The immaterial events we'll call a false positive. Those actions really, if you don't have a way of automatically filtering those out, it's a waste of time for your audit team, investigating this stuff, opportunity costs of not spending time on material relevant activities. It drags an organization down when they need to be focusing on what actually has an impact. So you can do user access conflicts. We look at this here, how many users we have and the number of SOD violations they had here. And this was across close to 115,000 transactions. Now with a did do analysis in here, we're able to filter this down and really point your team in the right direction of what to focus on. By looking at what actually happened in terms of materially relevant SOD violations, we now identify that there's only 4 users that have conflicts that you need to investigate because they actually performed the violation. So that's moving from 208, potentially you could look at, to 4. In terms of the exceptions, the number of transactions where it was granted and it was aware of, you've halved that. And now we can take a look at the actual dollar value of what's going on here, so the organization can focus on what has the biggest material impact in terms of risk. Some of these smaller violations in terms of financial quantification, they could be important as well. But if you're looking at 11,000 here, 5,000 here in the total of SOD violations, where to spend your time and focus on, and really the extra resources you have now from not looking in a bunch of false positive events or immaterial events. So from a continuous monitoring of segregation duties perspective, we're now able to identify violations that happen across your applications. That's the first step there. And the second step is doing this whole process much more efficiently. Now I want to move into user access reviews or access certifications, and we'll kind of round this out and we'll jump into demo with Anand. So the user access reviews, again, we're integrating across all your applications, over 140 applications, to pull the activity in, one from the perspective of what entitlements do they have, but also to understanding of what have they done with this access here. In pulling these together and allowing your business managers or approvers on here to see a consolidated view of application access on everything that their users have. So traditionally, we'd see that you might have a access certification campaign run, and you're going to have to pull the team in from the SAP side, pull somebody in from the Oracle side, pull somebody in from PeopleSoft or Salesforce. You're having to basically herd cats of one, the managers, but two, also your technical resources and your admins who need to pull this data and make sense of it. So what we can now do with this centralized approach is automate that process, pull all the information in, and then with a centralized approach to your data being, your access data being consolidated, apply the cross application SOD checks to highlight any potential risk in there. That really simplifies, I would say, the approver's job. They're now not, searching for a needle through a haystack. They are automatically seeing the highest risk activity and potential violations that their users have, and doing this all through kind of a self-service portal to help expedite this activity and ensure that your SOD violations aren't missed, and that the whole process is much more efficient. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Anand, and we will jump into a more exciting demo. Anand, you're the presenter now.
Can you guys see my monitor?
Looks good.
Perfect. All right, thanks, Ryan. Ryan went through a lot of details about the business case of why Pathlock is being used by a lot of customers and what is the value proposition there, right? What I want to do is in the next couple of minutes, I want to just go through how we do this match. We talked about 100 140 different apps, and we said, we do a lot of automation and whatnot, right? So just want to give you some details around how it works, right? So the way things work is that Pathlock integrates into applications and the identity sources. So in this case, I just mentioned a few Oracle applications and Jagger and Blackline and whatnot, right? So there are 140 different apps. I can't potentially put everything in here. I just put few. So what we do here is we integrate into the applications. We also integrate into the identity source. What we create is a user master. The user master consists of the security attributes and the identity attributes. Security attributes are the applications that the user is enrolled with, the entitlements, the roles, the functions, you name it, that are given to this user to perform his job duties, right? So those are all normalized and put into this bucket. We also take the identity attributes because it's important. As we go through our demo, you'll see how important it is, because this identity attributes define who the user is, what location, what project, what business unit, what position is working from. These are critical set of information that can be used when downstream, and I'm going to explain how. And also we have out-of-the-box rule sets. We can customize the rule sets. You can do a lot of things that you can play around over here as well. Now, this forms the foundation of what Pathlock can do. Like Pathlock uses for a lot of different use cases. It could be SOD risk analysis, user access reviews, and provisioning and whatnot. Now, the primary focus of this demo is SOD, so let me just focus on that. So when you have all this information set up, as an internal audit, you can come into the Pathlock platform and create a campaign or a job that will take these attributes into consideration. Let's assume you have about 70,000 users in your user base. You don't want to potentially want to run all the 70,000 users at risk analysis at once. You might want to segregate them by itself. Like, you want to put some bucket of users because of their profile. It could be contractors. You want to bucket out some certain users who have IT admins in a different bucket. So with these attributes, you can do that. You can create campaigns based on these attributes. So you're filtering out based on this different set of attributes, and you can give it to a reviewer, and the reviewer can take action of mitigating or remediating. Mitigation, as you all know, is just saying, what, this guy is my buddy, and I want to give him this access. It's all okay. You also can remediate this access by removing the permission that creates this conflict. So that's how Pathlock kind of automates a lot of SOD risk analysis for our customers. Integration into the application, out-of-the-box SOD rule sets. You have user master that you create, and you have jobs that are very generic. So that means if you have a new user popping up with the sales title, automatically you get picked up with the job that has you're focusing on sales or IT admins, or depending on the attribute the campaign is created for. Now, what I would do is I'll jump into the platform itself. It's a live demo, so bear with me here. The first thing I talked about is the user master that we create. It's important to understand that within Pathlock, you can click on any user that you want. We're talking about 70,000 users. You might have 3,000 users for that reason. You go in here, you click on any user. You can see the attributes of the user, who is the manager, when is the hire date. Again, we don't have any limitation of how many attributes that we can go with. We can go with one attribute, or you can go with 80 different attributes. It's not about the quantity, it's about the quality of it. Now we can click on the access. You can see all the applications that he is enrolled with. At an average, based on the recent study, it says about 80 to 20 different critical applications that users are enrolled in any given organization. So guess what? 18 different applications with thousands of users. It's very, very complex. So here's where we get to show you the blueprint of your users that you have in your landscape, the roles that they have, and the attributes that we talked about. Now, once you have that, the next thing that I also want to show you guys is the rule sets that we provide out of the box. Again, every business is different, and it's important to also understand that within the rule sets, you have every business works in a certain fashion. If you have SAP, you might you create a vendor there. You can pay in Cooper. If you have Oracle, you have Ariba. It doesn't matter. So you can mix and match depending on the appetite of the organization, you can do SAP Ariba or Oracle Coupa for that reason. So the idea here is that it's a blind spot there. And people have to realize that this blind spot, if you do manual SOD risk analysis, it is not visible to anyone. It's also really complex to do, even within in-map SOD risk analysis, considering how many applications you have, how many users you have. Here is a bunch of SOD conflicts, and as you all know, the thumb rule for SOD conflict is that you have multiple functions, and each function, things are getting easier for people to go around and create different things. Here's a maintain payroll configuration here. There are 10 different ways that you can create this configuration, and these are the very granular set of permissions that we provide for that. We provide for your SOD risk analysis. Now, once you have this rule sets defined, once you have the user master defined, this is where you are right now. Now you would, as an internal auditor, you come in, you create a campaign within the platform, and the campaign is nothing but a job. It is the term that we use at Pathlock. You go in and say, you know what, I want to create a new campaign, and guess what? Because you have the attribute set of information that is already pulled in from different systems, you can come in and say, you know what, I want to pull this people with this org unit, or I want to pull users with this geographic location, or these applications. If you are doing a cross app, you can say, you know what, I want to do a cross app SOD with Microsoft Dynamics, and I can make success factor for this. You can start pulling this, creating a campaign. So the idea is that you don't need to boil the whole ocean. You can go step by step. You can do segregation of duties for a subset of users, and you can also do it across apps as well. These are the primary advantages that you have that differentiates us in the market. Now, once you create a campaign, there will be an email that goes to a reviewer, and here is a reviewer I already pre-configured. And this reviewer, when she gets an email saying that she has to review the tasks of SOD conflicts that are posted to her, she can go and say, you know what, there are different SOD conflicts here, and there's a risk ID associated with each one of them, and there is the severity associated with them, and there's a lot of set of information. Obviously, you can go here and say, you know what, I want to mitigate the task, or you can go inside each of these tasks. So if I go here, I can see the audit history, showing you who has initiated the request, when they want us to get it done, and you can go into the permission as well. This is a critical risk user. Let me just go into something that has more multiple functions here. So here's a multiple function use case. So here, as you can see, I can remediate or mitigate. So as I said, mitigate is like, you know what, access required. This means you are saying, you know what, this guy needs his access, and you want to mitigate, and you can put a mitigation control on top of it. You can define your own mitigation controls. And if you want to remediate, you can go here and say, you know what, this guy doesn't need the sales order processing permission, and the reason code is whatever you can define, and it could be a huge Dropbox. And then you can say, you know what, I don't want this guy to have this permission, and you can update the help ticket and say, you know what, I am making sure, and this guy doesn't need this permission. So basically, we can integrate into ServiceNow, Jira, Freshservice. There are a lot of ticketing systems out there which are very popular. We are more than happy to integrate into them as well. So I save this permission, and then guess what? The task item for me right now is instead of 11, 10 to 10. So that means one task item is done, and you can track those in your campaigns. So when you go to your campaign, you can see 10 open items still. You can see what those task items are. You can always drill down and look at it and whatnot. So this is how we give value to our customers. Not only we integrate into apps, we pull this information that we look for. We create campaigns which are very dynamic and to help you segregate your users, not just look at it once. And then you have reviewers getting emails, and all the information is at their fingertips, and any action that is performed by users are reported in a universal report dashboard that will pass on to your internal auditors or external auditors for that reason. I hope that demo made sense. I'll hand it back to Stephanie here. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask us right now. So let me just make sure. Okay. Stephanie, how are you there?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. If you have, we're going to move on to our Q&A portion. So if you have any questions, please add them now into the chat box or the question box. Okay, our first question is, do you support custom applications?
Yeah, so good question. The question is, do you support custom applications? Absolutely. When we talk to our prospects, every time they come up with some off-the-shelf commercial applications, they also come out with some custom applications as well. It's much easier to integrate, obviously, because you developed it. It's more, you can expose the APIs and you can integrate into those apps.
Okay, great. The next question we have is, the functions, etc., look very much like GRC values. How closely are the two linked?
Sorry, I didn't get the question, Stephanie.
The functions look very much like GRC values. The question is, how closely are the two linked?
Yeah, so if I got the question, is it similar to the GRC? See, the core concept of functions is always the same. If you look at, if you have a SAP GRC or any other GRC system, the functions are the ones that are triggering this conflict, and obviously what we provide is a framework, and there's no one suit that fits everyone. So we need to work with the organizations to see what is their business process, so that we can take this framework and fit into the use cases.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, I would like to know if this comes with pre-populated SOD risk rule set similar to SAP GRC, and if yes, is it customizable?
Absolutely. So we do provide out-of-the-box rule sets, and it's definitely customizable. So you can take the out-of-the-box rule sets and clone it to your needs.
Okay, great. The next question is, what are the timelines for implementation for SOD risk analysis? We have 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah, so if you have 15 to 20 apps, again, we need to understand what those apps are to start with. But the thumb rule here at Pathlock is that we take about 8 to 12 weeks to implement an SOD risk analysis for multiple apps.
Okay, and then the next question is, who are the administrators of the platform?
It's a very good question. So the question is more about who are the administrators of the platform. Basically, I would say anyone with a title of internal audit, depending on the use case. Again, if you are looking for SOD risk analysis, I would say internal audit can come in here and create their campaigns and then assign it to the reviewers who are the business user or process owners. If you're looking at provisioning, there could be IT admins who are logging into this platform. And if you're looking at user access review, again, it's internal audit. Depending on the use case, it slightly varies, but when we implement everything for all our customers, there's a center of excellence team that kind of works on it.
Okay, great. I think that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you, Ryan and Anand, and thank you all for attending. We have a few announcements to go over before we end. If you would like more information on the merger, you can go to pathlock.com/merger. This site is being regularly updated with new questions and FAQs. We also have an event coming up, SAP Insider in Las Vegas on July 18th. Pathlock is a platinum sponsor at this year's event. Our next webinar will be Why Controls Automation is the Future of Security and Compliance for PeopleSoft. And that will be on Thursday, July 12th at 1 p.m. Central Daylight Time. So with that, we would just like to say thank you so much for coming, and we hope to see you at our next webinar event.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Anand.